Hey everyone, Angelo here. Welcome to another design tutorial. Today, I want to show you how to animate individual text layers behind an image in Adobe InDesign. In this lesson, we'll also go over how to use the quick selection tool in Photoshop, bring in a PSD file, and animate the text. So let's get started. Okay, so the first step will be removing a background from the main image that we'll be using in our InDesign layout. I have an image here that I'm just going to drag right into the workspace in Photoshop, and we'll be using the quick selection tool to keep parts of this image while removing a lot of the background. Now, before you start selecting areas that you want, just think about how you want the text to animate as well in InDesign. So for this, I'm going to have the text come behind some of the foreground mountain, behind my subject here, and then make its way off to the right. But you could also select a lot of these mountains in the back if you wanted things to be behind those mountains. But for this lesson, I'm going to keep it pretty straightforward. So to access the quick selection tool in Photoshop, it's actually the fourth tool from the top. If perhaps you have it on Magic Wand tool or Object Selection tool, go ahead, click and hold for the flyout and then select the quick selection tool. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here, and I want to increase the size of my brush here. And to do that, a simple way of doing that is just using the left or right square bracket on your keyboard. So right now I'm pressing the right square bracket and there's the left square bracket. And you do notice that I have a little plus sign in my brush. That's because I'm in the Add to Selection selection. So if you wanted to subtract from the selection, you would select the minus version of the brush. But I'll show you a quick way of toggling between the two so you don't have to keep pressing on each one of these icons. So to zoom in and out, a quick way is just hold your Option key or Alt on Windows and just scroll in and out on with your mouse. And so I'm going to let Photoshop do a lot of the work for me, and I'm going to just click and drag and paint in the areas of the image that I want to keep. So for this, I want to keep a lot of this mountain in the foreground, not the background. You notice right now I'm in my Add to Selection brush. I could click on the Subtract From, but if you hold your, again, Option key, you see it becomes the Subtract From. And for this, I'm just going to bring that selection back in. And again, for this, it doesn't have to be perfect, because essentially we're going to be layering this original shot behind and putting the PSD, which we'll save in a second, in the foreground. That will allow us to essentially sandwich some text in between the two and animate it. So again, I'm going to zoom in a bit here and decrease the size of my brush, and I'm just going to bring that in a bit. So if you want to add to the selection, just go inside and bring it out. And if you want to subtract from, hold your Option key, go on the outside and bring it in. You're going to find that you're going to be doing that quite a bit when you're doing this. And obviously, I'm doing this a little bit quicker than I ever would if I was taking my time to do it. So, and you could see, again, Photoshop detects those edges because this one's pretty straightforward and a lot of the edges are sharp and you can see them pretty simply. It'll be easy to snap the selection marching ants there. You could see them snapping right to the subject. Now, the subject in this image here is from a distance away, so you're going to have some softer edges and it'll be a little bit trickier to go in and select the areas that you want. But again, I recommend taking your time when you're doing this. So here between his legs, you would need the Subtract From, okay? And then get in that area. You could see automatically Photoshop detected this area. You could see I have to fix this part up. Just gonna decrease the size of your brush. So you'll be doing a lot of zooming in, zooming out. Again, this area here, hold down Option or Alt on Windows and then just drag in there. And just do like more of a painting motion. Oftentimes when you're first using this tool, you'll have the tendency to start click, 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 click. That's going to give you more of a choppy result. So just take your time as if you're kind of outlining something. All right, so that's not bad. I'm not going to refine the edges because I'm not going to need to, but I'll show you anyhow if I wanted to even tighten up these edges a little bit more, the process that I would take. Let me just fix down this area here. Let me increase the size. Bring that in. Again, I'm using subtract from selection. And to mouse over, basically when I'm panning, you may or may not know this, hold your space bar and just kind of maneuver that way. So for this, holding Option and just cleaning that last bit up. So if I wanted to go ahead and remove the background from this selection, I could do that. I will show you one of the process I take before I move on to that next step. Is if I select up here, actually before I do that, I want to go into my layers panel, and I want to add a duplicate of this, just so we're working non-destructively. I'm gonna right click and just duplicate that layer. You can rename it. I'm just gonna leave it background copy. Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna click on that one. I'm gonna click on select and mask, and you can see if I zoom in here, there are some areas here. See the kind of fringing and the white areas around the edge. Again, for this tutorial, it's not gonna matter because basically we're gonna be adding those pixels back when we layer the images together. But let's just say you were cutting this out and didn't want that. You can use the Refine Edge tool, which could help. And basically, it's the same process. You could see I have the plus and negative brushes, and you would just paint around those areas to tighten that up a little bit more, okay? Another way of doing it is going to the Smart Radius option here. So I usually click that, and I increase the radius to about 2 pixels, and you can automatically see that that tightens up the selection a little bit more as well. And then you can use your global refinements here. So one that I would find useful for this this example is the Shift Edge. Maybe bring it in a little bit. That works well with the radius, the Smart Radius Edge detection. Okay, so those are some of the things I would do when I would be using this tool. So let me go ahead and click OK. And because I have my selection in place here, let me just go back to the layers panel here, and I'm going to turn off this bottom layer, okay, the background layer. And with the background copy selected, work your way down, and we want to select Add Layer Mask. You can see that removes the background, but keeps the area that we want. And another neat trick here is because we have a background copy with those pixels in place as well, if I click on the background copy mask here, which I can disable by holding Shift and clicking on that mask, that's an easy way of disabling it and then turning it back on, okay? But with that selected, the mask area, if I click or press B on my keyboard, which is the brush tool, and I paint in white, okay, make sure that over here this is white and the one in the back is black. I can see the area here where his hair gets a little lighter. I may have missed that during the quick selection process. You can paint those pixels back in, okay? And that's basically stealing from the pixels down below. That's why it's a good idea to make a copy. So again, that's working non-destructively, and you can go ahead and bring back some pixels. And I did notice I have some areas here, and again, it's not going to matter if you wanted to remove pixels. There's You can probably see that there. If I press X on my keyboard, now it switches to black, and I can remove. So black removes the pixels, and white reveals them. Okay, so just keep that in mind as a cool tip on how to use not only the quick selection tool, but adding layer masks and using them to remove backgrounds. Okay, so again, let me just show you again. If I press X again, you can see that his knee and his leg there, some of the pixels got lost during that, and that's because the subject in this case was from a further distance, so it's harder to pick up those edges. So this is a good way of going back in and bringing those pixels back. So his leg, the pixels in his legs and shoes, or whatever areas, the socks, you can bring those back in. Okay, so I'm happy with this for now. And again, for this tutorial, when we bring it into InDesign, that won't matter because the pixels from the original image will make up for the ones we lost during this process. So I'm gonna go up to File, Save As, and I'm gonna save this. I already have one there, so I'll call this main image -2, and make sure that you're saving it as a Photoshop file, PSD. This will allow you to go back into this file, make any other adjustments. If you export it as a PNG, you're gonna lose all these layers and it'll be a flattened out. You still won't have the background, which is fine, but you won't be able to go in and edit those layers. Okay, so I'm gonna hit save, hit OK, and we're gonna move to InDesign now, and I'm gonna show you how to bring in these images and start animating the text. Okay, so we're back in InDesign here, and before we move on, I do want to show you the end result of this lesson. You can see in a previous layout that I've done here, the animated text will come in one character at a time behind the image that we cut out in Photoshop. So I'm going to show you how this works. I created a second page in this document. And so the first step is not only bringing in that PSD file, but bringing in the original image that contains the background. And to do that, I'm just going to click and drag both files and drag them onto the page. And now instead of clicking and dragging, you want to ensure that these are both the same size. So I'm going to click and then click. So you can see that both of them are the same size. I'm going to open my layers panel here, and I want to ensure that the main image JPEG is at the bottom and the PSD cutout, let me just tear this off here. The PSD cutout is at the top, okay? And now what I want to do is select both of them and use my alignment tools up top here. So I want to make sure that they're aligned to the selection, and I want to align the horizontal and vertical centers, okay? So basically now, if I turn off JPEG, you could see one has the background and one doesn't, but they're perfectly placed on top of each other, okay? This will allow us to put text in between the two, which is really cool. So I'm going to select both, and let's go into just adjust it and put the top left hand corner of the image on the top left hand corner of the page, and then hold your Shift Command on Mac or Shift Control on Windows and drag the right hand corner all the way to the right. And again, I could turn off the bottom layer, and one has a background and one doesn't. Okay, that's why I said in Photoshop it didn't really matter that we had to have those edges perfectly, because we're getting them back with the background here. Okay, good. So what I'll do now is just lock both these layers, and now we could start adding our text. For this lesson, it's we're basically doing a fictional visitor guide cover page for Yosemite National Park, and the two text or typefaces I'm using, Babas New, and this one I found is really cool. It's an Adobe font called Calgary Script OT. All right, so let's start with the main text layers, and you'll have to do these individually, remember, because that's how they'll be animated. So I created the first one, Shift Command greater than, or Shift Option Command greater than to do it in increments of 10 point size, which is quicker. And let's make it Babas new. I guess I should have created a, let's make it bold. I should have created a style guide from this so I didn't have to keep doing it. Let's make it a little bit bigger. So something like that is good. There's the Y. And so let's just make it an even 200 pixels, okay? Perfect. All right, and then basically what I'm gonna do is just Option and drag as many copies as you need. So YOSEMIT. And then just start going ahead and replacing these letters. Of course, the M is a little bit wider, so go ahead and adjust that. Move these guys a little bit to the right. I, T. And don't worry about the spacing as of yet. We'll fix that. E. All right. And what I usually do is go in and tighten up these frames, okay, just to make sure that they're all as snug as they can be, and basically do that by hovering over any of the anchor points on the top or right hand corners or any of them and double click, and that will adjust just like that, just like that, and just like that. And then basically what I'm going to do is use my left and right arrow keys to kind of mimic the kerning of the text a little bit, and then we'll center it as a final point. And then of course we'll change the color of it. I'm going to take my guides off so I can see the exact spacing, because I want to be as close as I can be here. Okay. And of course, if you hold Shift and then your left arrow, that just increases the space of the shift as you're shifting the text over. Okay, and let's bring that last one over. So I've got my kerning close to what I like, and I'm just gonna click on the first frame, hold Shift, and click on the others. Actually, you know what? I locked this background, so just click and drag all of them, and then make sure that you get it into a point where it's kind of centered. So once you see that magenta line light up where you see it there, I'm just gonna make it a little bit bigger. And something like that. Actually, how did I have it down here? It's a little bit smaller actually, so something like this. Yeah, because I want the subject to be overlapping the O part, so that's good. And let's go ahead and change the color. I'm just going to tear off the swatch here, and I think for this I used it's a Pantone Green 13U. Oops, I'll get back to that one in a sec. Oh, actually it's 3. So let's go back to 3. Yep, that's the one. 13's a little too dark. Okay, so let's keep going. And it's very important that you do the frames individually if you want to achieve the result from this lesson. If you contain them all in the same text frame, they won't come in individually. So that's the whole purpose of this. We want the text to come in on intro, on page load, one at a time. Okay, and I do want to add a drop shadow on all of these. So let me just highlight and drag all those again. I'll put the swatches panel back. Let's go to our properties panel here and click on the effects icon. And the cool thing about this is you can add the drop shadow all together at once. And so you can adjust the angle of it. That looks fine. You can also adjust the opacity. So let's make it something like 50%. And just, that's fine. Hit OK. Let's open our layers panel again. And you'll notice in our layers panel here, we have some maneuvering to do. So I'm going to unlock these. Again, I want the PSD to be at the very top. You can see that automatically moves our subject in front of the text. And then you want to make sure that this is spelled out correctly. So bring in, just adjust the text layers here. Spell it out correctly. So Yosemite, bring the M here, I there. Good. That's exactly how we want it, because that will work when we're animating it and setting up the timing of this as well. So now that we have our image in and we have the text in the way we want, the last step is animating this text as well. Actually, one more thing. Let me just bring in National Park, copy it from that page, Shift Command Control V, Shift Option Command V. Perfect. So that's where I want that. I'm just going to remove the animation from this one. We'll set that up as a final step. We have our text in and we have our image in. So let's go ahead now and start animating the text layers one at a time to come in as a 2D zoom in on page load. All right, so it's time to animate the text, and for this part, we're going to need two panels, animation and timing. Let's start with animation. I'm going to click on the first text frame, the letter Y, and in the preset, I do want to choose Zoom In 2D. The event will be on page load, and the duration will be 0.125. We only want to play this once, and everything else is good. So I'm going to move on to the second one and choose Zoom In 2D. And the duration will be 0.125. I believe that's the quickest duration that you can have when setting up an animation. And so I want this to come in fairly quick. If you think that's a little too fast, maybe try 0.5, so half a second. I just find 1 second's a little slow for a presentation like this where you want the characters to come in quick. Okay, so the preset, again, Zoom In 2D. The event, all of them will be on page load, 0.125. We only want it to play once. Let's click on the E character here and Zoom In 2D. On page load, 0.125, and play once. Okay, so I've gone ahead and added all the presets and the duration times for the Yosemite headline here. Let's go ahead and test that out and see how it looks before we move on and animate National Park. Perfect. So you can see that comes in at a nice speed. Again, if you wanted to make it half a second, there wouldn't be a huge difference, and it would still come in at a comfortable pace. I'm going to close this. Let's click on National Park. And for this, I just want it to fade in after Yosemite comes in at the beginning. So the preset for this will be a simple fade in on page load with a duration of, let's make this one 0.5. Good, so that is all animated now. As a final step, I just want to go to timing here and make sure that this is all in order. This is important because if one of these is out of place, so for instance, if Y was behind the O here, or under the O, I should say, the O would come in first as well, and then the Y would come in first. So make sure that this, of course, still spells Yosemite, and then National Park comes in at the very end. I am going to click on the Y letter here, and I do want a 0.5 second delay. So when the page loads, I don't want the text to start animating right away. I want there to be just a little bit of a delay, and then it comes in. Just so whoever's opening it or viewing it doesn't miss it, okay? So as a final step here, let's go ahead and publish this online and see how it looks in a web browser. All right, so our fictional visitor's guide for Yosemite National Park has now been published online. Let's have one last look and see how the text comes in on page load. You can see Yosemite comes in one letter at a time, and it finishes off with the National Park coming in as a fade in. So that's how you animate individual text layers behind an image in Adobe InDesign. If you enjoyed this tutorial, if you found it helpful, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to get notified when new lessons have been posted. If you'd like to learn more about interactive design or InDesign in general, go ahead and click the playlist above.